So welcome to all of our participants. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining from. I can see that we already have 4 people and counting. So we are very delighted to welcome you today to this AGRODEP Working Paper Webinar. Thank you for making the time to join us this Tuesday. We appreciate your presence and your commitment to our research endeavors. I am Laibu Take, Director of Communication and Outreach at Academia 2063, and I'm joining you from Dakar, Senegal. So as you join the meeting, please head to the chat and introduce yourself. Let us know the organization you represent and where you're joining from. We'd like to learn more from you. And if you haven't already, please click the link to subscribe to Academia 2063's mailing list so that you can keep abreast with all our activities and our research endeavors. As you know, over the next 1 hour, we are going to discuss one of the publications from Academia 2063's AGRODEP Working Paper series. And we are delighted and honored to have one of the members of AGRODEP who is a co-author of this paper, who will be making the presentation and who will be engaging with you over the course of the next hour to address questions, observations, and contributions to the research. So as usual, we are hoping for a highly engaging and interactive session. We encourage you to head to the Q&A section. You can find the box at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions or contributions that you would like to be brought to the floor or to the attention of the moderator, please add them in the Q&A chat. And of course, you are welcome to raise your hand during the conversation and you will be given the floor. Without further ado, I will now invite our moderator who will be guiding us through the next hour, Senior Scientist at Academia 2063, Dr. Paul Minor Guthiga.
Oh, so thank you very much, Lai, and hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining from. We welcome you to this AGRODEP Working Paper webinar. This is the second in a series. We started December last year when we had the first one, and this will be the second one. So we are very glad that you have joined, and we look forward to interactions. As Dr. Lai mentioned, today Dr. Obi Ebedi is going to make a presentation on the productivity, growth, and food security among maize-based farming households in Nigeria. We look forward to hearing more about that. So the way we are going to run the next hour, I will be inviting the director of the Department of Knowledge System at Academia 2063, Dr. Augustine Wamboyamju, to make some opening remarks. After that, we will have a presentation by Obi Ebedi for about 15 minutes or so, which will be followed by about 35 minutes or so of Q&A and discussion. And then towards the tail end, the Chief Scientist at Academia 2063, Dr. Christian Henning, is going to make concluding remarks. Otherwise, we welcome you very much to this webinar and look forward to interaction. So over to you, Dr. Augustine.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you to everyone online. We are pleased to have you in this webinar, the first in the year 2025. As Paul indicated, this series is very important for the work that we at Academia 2063 support in making sure that economies across the continent are able to be associated with the crafting and the implementation of strategies deriving from the Malabo and now Kampala Declaration. So this event is coming at a very opportune time, dealing with an issue that's very important at times it can be overlooked. The issue of household, it should be put in the center of the challenges that we are dealing with. What gets discussed at global, continental, regional level has to be seen. The effect of what we're trying to do has to be appreciated closer to where things really happen or where the difference really takes place at the household level. So what we'll be discussing today through Dr. Obi's presentation is something very important. I'm also taking this opportunity to indicate that academia is very pleased to explore every single opportunity to help bring on board all AGRODEP members that will be contributing into helping African countries to translate the Kampala Declaration into implementable set of actions. In that regard, in the weeks and months to come, we'll be engaging with you more on how concretely your contribution can really help African Union support countries in translating this declaration into implementable actions on the ground. Of course, your contribution will be channeled through the various networks that you have joined or you are expressing interest in joining, whether it's about resilience, climate change, nutrition, trade, and the like. You will be very much welcome to express interest into making particular a contribution. So I won't take too much of our limited time. I will give back the floor to you, Paul, to invite Dr. Obi for her presentation to help frame the discussion. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Dr. Augustine. So we want to give the floor to Dr. Obi Ebedi to make her presentation. Meanwhile, if you have a question, you can type in the Q&A so that should we not be able to take all the hands, you can already type the question there and we'll sure address it at the end of the presentation. So Dr. Obi, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining from, all across the world. I'm really honored to be the presenter for the second series of this webinar by AGRODEP. And the title of my presentation, the paper I'll be presenting today, is Productivity Growth and Food Security Among Maize-Based Farming Households in Nigeria. Yes, this work was co-authored with one of my students, Esther Lijadu Moreni Keji. She couldn't join today due to several reasons. But anyway, this is the outline for the presentation today that I'll be taking you through. Let's go straight into the introduction. Maize is a very important staple across the world. It is the second most cultivated crop in the world. And globally, about 117 countries produce maize. And in this maize production, we have a total global production of about 1.48 billion metric tons. And all over the world, putting acreage or hectarage together, we have about 249.2 million hectares of land planted to maize all over the world. And the global average yield is 5.1 tons per hectare. But of course, there are countries like the US, that is the highest producer of maize, that have yield as much as almost 20 tons per hectare. And of course, there are countries like Nigeria that have tons of about less than 2 tons per hectare. But maize is very important to Africa. Maize is it's like the food security crop for the African continent. Almost every meal you know, almost every other meal in Africa relates to maize in one way or the other. And across Africa, there's a problem of low productivity, because I just mentioned that the global yield is about 5.1 tons per hectare. But in Africa, the average yield is about 2 tons per hectare. And it's even worse in Nigeria, 1.6 tons per hectare. So low maize productivity is something that covers the face of the African continent. And this portends food security problems for the continent, and particularly for Nigeria, the country in focus. So the problem that we are looking at is that in a country like Nigeria, the population of Nigeria is estimated to be well over 200 million. And implementing food security has remained a very key problem for the country. Nigeria ranks 103rd out of 116 nations when you talk about food quality, food affordability, and access according to Global Food Security Index. And that is quite poor for the country that is the largest populated country in Africa. In fact, it's the largest population of Black people on the face of the earth. 103 out of 116 nations. And Nigeria is a country that has had several food security programs over time, and several programs also to improve our productivity. Right from before independence, there have been programs to improve productivity. There have been programs to improve the food security situation of the people. Some of the recent ones are like the ATA, the Agricultural Transformation Program, the Agricultural Promotion Program, some of the very early ones, the Operation Feed the Nation, you know, those were food security programs, and so many others in the line of food security, in the line of productivity. But these programs have had little successes, judging by the level of food security of the people and the level of productivity, agricultural productivity, but particularly we're looking at maize productivity, judging by the level of those in the country. And the empirical gap on maize product, well, there have been so many studies looking at maize productivity. Maize productivity studies they flood the literature. But with these government interventions, many times our government interventions have not actually looked at tracking our productivity over time and ensuring that it is sustained. Because when we talk about productivity growth, we are talking about productivity increase sustained over time. We are talking about low productivity today, not because the country or the government of the country has not been doing anything concerning productivity in Nigeria, but we haven't actually had a lot of research looking at tracking the increase of our productivity over time. How has it been growing? And policies ensuring that we keep adding on and growing and sustaining productivity increases. So that's productivity growth. And that's the empirical, the knowledge gap that this study is trying to fill. So this study has the following research questions. What is the level of productivity and productivity growth among maize-based farmers in Nigeria? May I say that this study refers to maize-based farmers as farmers that grow maize. But in Nigeria, as in many other African countries, we are not very big on monoculture. And so most of our farmers, who are mainly small-scale farmers, grow maize in addition to other crops. So most of our maize farmers are not maize, do not grow maize only. So that is why they are called maize-based farmers in this study. So we also want to, this study also asks the question, what proportion of maize-based farmers transit from being unproductive to productive over time. Also, we are asking the questions, what is the level of food security among maize-based farming households, and what is the effect of productivity growth on food security among maize-based farming households? That's basically, those are the research questions. And the motivation for this study is that most studies in Nigeria have actually dwelt on the determinants of productivity, and studies like Ibitola et al. 2019, Ukoha et al., they have dealt on the determinants of productivity. So productivity, next slide, please. Productivity, studies on productivity are really rampant. And then there are just very few studies that are focused on productivity growth outside the country, like for instance, Mumba 2019 in Zambia. They focused on productivity changes of small-scale farmers in that country. The link between productivity growth and food security has actually not been well studied. And looking at the expectation, looking at productivity itself and food security, is that it is expected that as farmers increase in productivity of their in agricultural productivity, it will go to affect their income and go on to trickle down to their living standards. And of course, we expect the improvement in their food security. So this link actually has not been properly explored in the literature. So but having this knowledge can help our governments to design better public policies to address the issue of poor productivity growth in relation to food insecurity. That's the problem. Okay, so that's what motivated this study. So this study, we want to look at the materials and methods. This study, of course, as I have mentioned earlier, looks at Nigeria as the study area. This study was carried out on Nigeria. The data was obtained from secondary sources, the general household survey data for two waves, the waves of 2015-2016 and the 2018-2019 wave were used for this study. And across those two waves, about 572 maize-based farmers were, of course, the maize-based farmers that we had complete information for them in the two waves were used. And data analysis was done using descriptive statistics, total factor productivity, Markov chain, the Foster-Great-Beck food security measures, and logit regression models. Okay, let's take a look at the results now. The socioeconomics, sorry, the table is, the table may be a bit tiny, but you can enlarge it, on your screen. Okay, so the socioeconomic characteristics of, we can see the households that on the average, a maize-based farmer, household head of a maize-based farming household is on the average about 50 years of age, with a very large household size. Well, some African countries may not call that very large, but on the average, this is a large household size of about 9 people. And most maize-based farmers are smallholder farmers, less than 2 hectares, of land cultivated per household. So that's basically what we can glean from the socioeconomic characteristics. Okay, moving on to the looking at the total factor productivity of the maize-based farmers. We can see that the average or mean total factor productivity is less than 1, is 0.9 on the average. So that shows that there's low productivity. It's positive, but it's low. It's low productivity. If you can just basically round it up, to 1, the farmers are barely breaking even. They are barely breaking even, and we can see that most of the farmers are in that level of either they have no productivity, or they have negative productivity. Most farmers are in that level, in that category. Okay, going on to look at the transitions, how the households, the maize-based households, transit from one level of productivity to the other in between the two waves. The uniqueness of this study is that we want to look at productivity growth from one time period to another. That's why the panel data was used, unlike others, most past studies that just concentrated on a one-time period and studied the productivity of the farmers in that period. So looking at the productivity transitions, it indicates that only a modest improvement in maize productivity occurred between the two time periods. Most of the farmers actually remained unproductive rather, as they transited from between 2015, 2016 and 2018, 2019. And this actually indicates that most maize farmers experienced a worsening productivity levels between the two time periods. So we cannot say that productivity actually improved, in those two time periods, judging by the majority of households. You can see from 2015 to 2016, the households transiting to, for instance, those that remained in no productivity. They were about 68% of the population. That's quite large. Those that moved from being not productive to being highly productive, just about 16%. So we cannot actually give ourselves a pat on the back for this over time. So our farmers are actually still in very poor level of productivity. Now let's look at the food security indices of the maize-based farming households. We can see that actually in the first time period of 2015-2016, most households were food secure. Almost about 58% of households were food secure in 2015-2016. But coming to 2018-2019, we have most households now being food insecure. 52% of the households now being food insecure. So it still shows a worsening picture for food security situation in the country between those two time periods. Okay, finally, looking at the logics regression estimates, we can see that looking at the results, we can see that productivity growth, as expected, has a positive effect on food security. If farmers are increasing in their productivity over time, it goes on to improve or enhance the probability or likelihood that they will be, the likelihood of being food secure. And if productivity is dull or lulling or reducing over time, and that, so also is the likelihood for the households being food secure, dwindling also over time. And so we'll look at the conclusion and policy recommendations later. But that's key for policy, that we should be looking at whatever will sustain productivity over time, because food security, being food secure today, although the study did not look at the transitions of the food security, but we could see that between the households in the second time period, 2018-2019, more households were food insecure. And so we can also see other factors that improved food security. Household size, while you may say that doesn't follow a priori expectation, but there have been several studies that also corroborate for farming households that because many farming households use family labor more than hired labor. So having a large household size is also equivalent to having a large workforce on the farm, and that also goes a long way, because we run a labor-intensive more than capital-intensive agriculture. So that goes a long way into improving output and improving generally income and all of that, and which will also tell on food security. Okay, another very important determining factor for food security here are secondary education and tertiary education levels, not primary education, which of course indicates that higher levels than basic education, which is the drive of most African governments, is needed. Most African governments are particular about farming households having at least primary education, but we can see that secondary and tertiary education even counts more. So governments need to move beyond that. And so basically, those are the results for this study. And so this study, in conclusion, this study has tried to look at the effects of productivity growth on food security. We have seen that productivity growth is low and was low over time for the two time periods. And most maize-based farmers, they either remained unproductive or even transited from being productive to being unproductive. So meaning that we have a climb that is not favoring productivity, policy climb, and the government has more to do. Also, food security levels worsened between the two time periods, and the factors that affected food security were productivity growth as expected, household size as not so expected, secondary and tertiary education as expected. They affected productivity growth. And so this study recommends that food security interventions by government should look at what will sustain productivity over time. That is, productivity growth should be included in policy considerations for food security, at least in Nigeria. And if that can be in Nigeria, then we can also say so for the rest of other African countries. And like what I said about education, most African countries are very big on primary education, but from the results of this study, African countries should look beyond ensuring that, farming households have at least primary education. More investment in education should be made so that farming households can also have access to secondary education and even going on to tertiary education. That will improve food security of farmers better than staying on primary education alone. So I really want to thank AGRODEP for this opportunity to present these findings of this study. It's still a working paper. In fact, a lot has gone into this study beyond what I have presented, trying to pull the two waves together and use better robust tools to run this analysis. But these are the findings of the working paper, and I really say thank you for being an attentive audience. I want to hand over to the moderator now. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much, Dr. Obiebedi, for that nice and clear presentation. Very much appreciated. So, and also thank you for taking, just about time that was allocated. There are already a number of questions that we will begin with. Already some in the chat and others in the Q&A. But allow me just to ask one, a very general one, that we will answer together with the others. So maybe for some people, the assumption is that because the consumption of traditional food commodities, including the tubers like cassava and yam and others, is still quite prevalent in the Western Africa region compared to, say, Eastern or Southern Africa. The assumption somehow is that maize hasn't reached the level of being such a key determinant of food security, say, for example, in the Eastern Africa region. So, so somewhat a surprise that maize is that important, despite the fact that there is some consumption of the traditional tubers. Maybe you can just shed a little light on that. But let me highlight others. You'll note them. There is a question by Adebayo Shitu, which is also repeated by Abiola Sande Akande on how was total factor productivity measured. Maybe you'll need to shed light on that. Adebayo also asks, why use only 2 waves of data while you had access to the whole complete panel from 2011 to 2019? I hope you have noted that. Let me go to the, so those are like 3 questions. I'll take 5 first and then we continue. My colleague Titi Makombe has a question. What do you think are the reasons for worsening productivity and food security between 2015-16, 2018-19? So what are the reasons for the worsening food security situation? So then, okay, I will come to Zacchaeus. He has some explanation there a little bit, so I'll come back to him. So Abiola also asked, why not compare food availability with food insecurity incidents? Maybe you can do those first, and then we'll come to the others.
Sorry, the last question.
The last question, why not compare food availability with food insecurity incidents? Is it clear?
I think so.
Okay, very well. You can respond to those, then we will come back to the next round. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I really thank you for all those questions. Very good questions. let me start with Paul's question on how come maize is so important. Maize is really important. In Nigeria, let me stay on Nigeria and not because this study is on Nigeria. In Nigeria, when you take a look at the contribution to our calories, the cereals come up first, even before the tubers. So, and among the cereals, maize is the key cereal. Okay, so for Nigeria, maize is really important as a food security crop. So, like I said, let me stay on Nigeria and not go beyond Nigeria, since that is where I did my study. But globally, maize is the second most important cereal, and that was the statistic that I presented. Okay, how was total factor productivity measured? Okay, total factor productivity was measured by the output of maize divided by the summation of the value of all inputs. So that's how total factor productivity was measured for each of the time periods. And then, though you didn't ask, total factor productivity growth was measured by having obtained the total factor productivity in each of the time periods. We subtracted the total factor productivity of the first period from the second period and divided by the first period and multiplied by 100. So that's how we arrived at total factor productivity growth between the two periods. And I think that was about 0.9% growth. Okay, what do I think are the reasons for worsening food security? Well, in Nigeria, we have been through a lot over time. We have had different governments, different policy somersaults, competing policies, conflicting policies. We have had all that. So we don't actually lack good policies. We have always had the problem of policy implementation in Nigeria, and that has gone a lot to affect our farmers. For instance, let me give you an example of conflicting policies. The government during the presidential initiatives, that was one of the initiatives that to boost productivity. So we had rice presidential initiative, maize, and different crops like that. And the farmers were given a lot of incentives to improve their productivity. I think basically inputs were given to them. And so the farmers were working on that. And then at the same time, oh, sorry, this example is for rice, though the question is general. Why? So this is for rice presidential initiative. I was mixing it up with maize. So because we hardly import maize, but we import rice, or used to import rice. And then the farmers were being encouraged to produce. And then the borders were also flooded with imported rice. And then at the end of the day, the farmers produced, and they were not, they did not receive encouraging prices for what they produced. We also have everything seems to be turning around the government, and also research, because government also funds research. We have poor research. in our food, in the food system. And all of that culminates in worsening problems of food security, rising food insecurity rather, rising inflation. It's should I say a tetra-headed problem. So there are so many reasons why food security has been worsening. Of course, population has been increasing, but food production has not been able to meet that level of population growth. So all of those are reasons for worsening food security, but not exhaustive. Okay, and why can I not compare food availability with food insecurity incidents? Well, food availability is one of the pillars of food security. And actually, this study looked at food security in the sense of food availability. So basically, what the pillar of food availability considered in this study is already, food availability is already included in this study. And when we are talking about, so you cannot compare something with itself, so to say. So that's how I can answer those questions. Over to you, Paul.
Okay, so thank you very much. Let me take another quick round based on questions already either in the chat and also in the Q&A section before I also open it up so that we can also hear some voices. But on this question of methodology, so somebody has, I think Zacchaeus Oluwafemi has some explanation here and a question. So maybe we'll listen. So he says the categorization of total factor productivity growth, if it is less than or equal to 0, then there is negative or no growth. And then he says between 0.01 and 1 indicates low growth, and a total factor productivity growth value of greater than 1 indicates high productivity growth. So then he says that this approach seems to be inadequate. What is the difference in interpretation of negative or no growth and low growth? That is 0.01 to 1. I hope you have understood that question. Of course, if you have access to the Q&A section, you may also read it there. But I am assuming maybe you're not able to do that right now. So that is a methodology. Sorry, that's a methodology question. And then there's another one by Patterson that says that measuring total factor productivity by only looking at the yield, that is kilogram per hectare or output, does overlook other inputs like labor, fertilizer, and technology. And therefore, he's asking why all these others were not included. So those are a methodological one. And a third and final one, Isaac has noted that the coefficient for credit, access to credit, was negative. So what is the interpretation? Does it mean that access to credit reduces food security? So those three, if you could respond to them, then I will ask some other people also to voice their questions. I will call the names out. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, Zacchaeus' question on productivity growth. I would like to correct that. Total factor productivity is what he was defining as when you have it as less than 1, it is negative. And when you have it as 1 or greater than 1, that is when you have total factor productivity. Total factor productivity growth, which is what I presented total factor productivity growth. I think if you can shoot slide 11, the total factor productivity growth less than or equal to 0 indicates negative or no growth. Low, well, when it is from, it's greater than 0 to 1, then it's low growth. And when it is greater than 1, it is high growth. This study got a total factor productivity growth of 0.9. That is why it was categorized as low growth. But for total factor productivity, you don't talk about productivity until it is 1 and above. So I hope I was able to clarify that. 1 is total factor productivity, 1 is total factor productivity growth. Now, the question about why labor was not included. Labor was included among the inputs. I did not list the inputs that were used that were summed up as the denominator for the total factor productivity. But labor was included in Naira. All the inputs were, the value of the inputs were used to calculate them. And then access to credit. Okay, access to credit being negative. I remember even during the first presentation at the academia conference, it was also pointed out. Access to credit was found negative. And when we look at even the, maybe we want to draw some understanding from maybe the socio-economic characteristics, and you see that most of the farmers do not have access to credit. Most farmers, they finance their agricultural activities through savings, friends and family, and many of them do not rely on credit. Now, for those that rely on credit, there's a very general problem among a lot of farmers accessing credit of being credit constrained. A farmer may request for a loan of, for instance, 500,000 Naira, and he gets only a loan of about half of that or less. So you have less than is required, and you are expected also to pay back like you have lot more than that. That little will not do what the farmer wanted it to do. And so many farmers are credit constrained, and that may be a reason for the negative sign as far as maize-based farmers in Nigeria are concerned. But that, I agree with you, is not expected. But I think I have another study that also found that, I'm trying to check for that study, that also found access to credit as sorry. Okay, that is Agidu and Sane 2018. Okay, they also found that many farmers are not benefiting as expected from the credit obtained due to credit constraints. And so access to credit in their study was also found to be negative. Okay. I think I've addressed the question so far.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Let's shift a little bit from the methodological questions. Mekonnen, if you can hear me, do you want to voice your question on the alternative incomes? And then I will also invite Claude, who also has a non-technical methodological question that he would want to ask. Those two, and then I'll invite one more, but this will be a technical one, a methodological one, and then we can close this session. Mekonnen, you can unmute. Okay, yes, please go ahead and ask.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Congratulations for the presenter. It's a good job. Made, as Paul mentioned, and you well presented it. It's a very important nutrition food and nutrition source for Africa in general, in West, East, and in many parts of Africa. Yes, my little question is, when the income from maize production and productivity declines, maybe farmers could have some alternative source of income, such as off-farm income or other means of trade and employment, short-term employment, that kinds of things. So do you have such experience in Nigeria? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Let me let's have another one. Claude, do you want to ask your question verbally? Claude Bizimana? Can he be allowed to speak? And then the final question on methodology, I will allow Oluwasola. If I'm pronouncing your name wrongly, you will forgive me for that, but you have something about the methodology. You will also have an opportunity to ask the question. Claude, are you ready?
Paul, it seems we lost Claude.
Okay, we lost Claude. Okay, so his question again is about what would be the role of crop insurance in the event of a drop in productivity. So if you can say anything.
I didn't get that.
Hello, sir.
What would be the role of crop insurance in the event of a drop in productivity?
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So is someone speaking? Is that Oluwasola or?
No, this is Oluwasola. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Go ahead and ask your question.
All right. Thank you, Dr. B, for that interesting presentation. I think the question I have is, I'm looking at the logic regression and I'm asking how, I think it's not clear how you measure food security, because I see food security is actually your dependent variable. How did you measure food security? Now I'm looking at the other variables, the explanatory variables. Did you include household, farm, and non-farm income as explanatory variables? Because those are actually variables that is expected that they will have some strong effects or significant effect on food security. Also, considering you use two-time wave data, and also I'm sure that these data, I think the 500 that they're about respondent, I think they are from different parts of Nigeria. So in your regression, did you incorporate time and region feast effects? Because that will also have a very strong effect on your results. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we allow one more? I see a hand up. So we can allow Zacchaeus to ask the final question. Apologies, time is not on our side because we need to enter into the concluding section. But let me allow Zacchaeus, please. If you can unmute.
Thank you, sir. Hello, sir. Thank you for the privilege, sir. I want to appreciate Dr. Obi for that wonderful presentation. But my sincere concern is this issue of categorization. We know that productivity is a relative issue, it's a relative concept. It would have been better, because I asked the question, how will you interpret negative? If we have used the mean, I think we can use the mean to categorize the productivity level. We have 1/3, 2/3, and anything above 2/3 will be more productive. But this one, based on what you have just done, I think there will be issue of interpretation, because I can see overall about 74% of the farmers are on the low level. If we go by that mean value, 1/3 of the mean value, 2/3 of the mean value, 75%, and there are a lot of literature to back it up that have been recorded. On the issue of comparing productivity of Nigeria, Africa with other things, the issue of monocropping and miscropping, the space there will be different in mode of operation, the labor requirements, there will be differences. And on the issue of the regression, if we have categorized productivity, it will have important to include in the explanation variable that low, moderate, and we see the level. Because some farmers may have low productivity and they may be food secure based on their priority. So that is just my concern. I will find way of other concern to you on your email back. Thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Okay, so thank you very much. I will not allow others, but kindly bear with me. Thank you, Shitu. I see that you have put your question in the chat because time will not allow us to take more questions. I invite Obi to take like 2 minutes to respond to those so that we can enter the closing session. Kindly.
I am really glad that this presentation has generated a lot of comments. So I'm honored. Now, let me quickly run through. Other sources of income, oh yes. Farmers, a lot of farmers have other sources of income, especially because we know that agriculture is seasonal in nature, so off-season, and even during the on-season, we still find farmers engaging in some non-farm income sources. So that is, well, we have that also in Nigeria to answer the question, and these farmers also, even the data has it. It's just that we did not look at that aspect for this study. Crop insurance is just coming up newly. Not that it's new, we've had some government initiatives in the past encouraging farmers, to take up insurance, but it's still very low level in our country. The measure of food security, I had said that it was the foster to break food security measures, where we used 2/3 of the mean per capita food expenditure to delineate households that are food secure and households that are not food secure. That's how food security was measured. Now, did we include the time, the region, and income into the regression? No, we did not include the time, the region, and the income. The income was already used to calculate the food security. So we could have included proportion, of income spent on food and things like that. This is still a working paper, so that can be your suggestion can be incorporated as we go on. The categorization of the food security, of the productivity growth. The categorization of the productivity growth. In literature, there are different ways that you categorize. your suggestion of using the mean is great, but if I use the mean, I would only have 2 categories. I can use tessers also to categorize it. And I can also use this because it is from literature. I will see if I can get the study as just before I round up. But and if I categorize, as I categorized low, medium, high, you expected that should have also come into the regression. That suggestion is welcome, but I wouldn't be using logits then. I'll be using maybe an ordered logit to achieve that. So I would say thank you for the suggestions. We're still, it's a work in progress, and I'm sure that the suggestions will also further this work. Thank you. Let me hand over to the moderator.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Obi, for that. And thank you also to all the participants for very active engagement with the content of the presentation today. We very highly appreciate. We actually are at the top of the hour when we should be ending, but we cannot end before we hear some concluding remarks from Dr. Christian Henning. I'll invite him now to summarize in 5 or so minutes. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. I think this was a very interesting first session for this year. I think what we see, if I should summarize this, that definitely it is a very important topic, of course, and I think it also shows that we need quantitative science-based approaches to get closer to answer these very important questions, and finally also to find corresponding political solutions. And also it is very important for these particular questions to use micro econometric analysis or micro-based analysis. Later on, it might also be connected, scaling up these findings on a macro scale. But this is all very nice, and I also think that this was a very ambitious study, and it was also a very interesting and lively discussion on this. I liked summarizing this and also maybe adding something to this discussion in a way, but mainly summarizing. So what we see is, but this is also an advantage of this kind of study, that we can talk about it in a very systematic way, and how specific findings and recommendations depend on specific assumptions and also strategies to come to these results. So one important thing is the measurement of technical progress or growth of technical progress. This was already mentioned, and I think this is very important. And one could see that the way you measured this is definitely a standard approach, but also this comes with some caveats. Some of these caveats have already been mentioned, but one important is also that you are aggregating heterogeneous inputs, and you include also labor. And to come to the input, the aggregate input measure, aggregating heterogeneous inputs, you are using prices, which is a good approach. But now if these prices are very much changing across farmers, first thing, and also within one farm across time, and particularly I'm focusing here on labor, then of course these measurements can also be very much biased. So at least one should double check what is, if you observe there is a decrease in overall technical progress, then you might check what is the true reason for this. Maybe it's just that there is the main reason is that this labor component, for example, dramatically changed. That might be one thing. So definitely this measurement thing is important. And on the other side, I would like like to mention that the way you are estimating these things, I think it is very interesting that you did this Markov chain estimations, and then on top of this, the food security. Now, Markov chain, and this came also in the discussion, these estimations definitely are the right approach, but they also have caveats, especially unobserved heterogeneity. And I think what came also out of this discussion, and at both levels, mainly on food security, you discussed this already, but this is also true for this Markov chain, which I think you did a multinomial logic. You didn't mention this, and it's okay. You have so many things, you cannot mention everything, but I think this is what you do. And then you should think about how can you integrate into this unobserved heterogeneity, for example, by using a random fact model, at least for this Markov chain part, or that has already been suggested. And I just want to emphasize this again, or highlight this. You should definitely use to catch unobserved heterogeneity, farm fix effects, and the regional and time fix effects, if you cannot take farm fix effect. But because you have a panel, you might also go for farm fix effects, and then you can capture this. So this definitely, there is room for improvement, but the main thing, I think it is definitely the right approach. It was a very ambitious approach, and you already showed some very interesting results. And this another thing what we see is this kind of quantitative science-based approaches allow a systematic discussion to come closer to true findings, which really can then be translated into policy actions, which really solve this kind of problem. So I congratulate you particular for this nice work and the presentation, but I also like to congratulate this complete forum. I think this has been a very interesting and very thoughtful discussion, and so I very much enjoyed it. So I will, with this, I'm ending, and thank you again all for your participation, and I'm really looking forward to the next AGRODEP lab. Okay, thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Christian, for those very interesting insights into this work. Very much appreciated. So allow me to thank you, Lai and Ibnu, and your communication team. You have done well. Today we had over 50 people attending. Very much appreciated for your effort in communication. Just to let the participants know that we will have another one coming soon. Already, you know, I have reached to some of you AGRODEP members to indicate your availability so that we can also get to hear more about your work. Thank you, everyone, for attending and participating. It's very much appreciated, and looking forward to the next one. So, Dr. Lai, do you have the final word for us?
Nothing except next time, come again and bring a friend. We'll be contacting you to share details on the next session, as Paul said. So thank you all for a rich and engaging session. See you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.